and then founded Mantra in, let's see, DeFi summer 2020, or actually right before.
Yeah.
So Mantra's going on almost 5 years. We basically made it very easy for builders, whether you're Web 2 native or Web 3, to be able to, create RWA assets on chain and then actually do stuff with them.
Speaking of the market,
Mm.
Bitcoin's above 100K. Did you guys have
Yeah.
a 100K Bitcoin party, or at least did you celebrate it in some way? Or okay, so can you tell me what's next? What are you guys working on that we can expect from you next? JP, hello, and thank you for agreeing to do this, man.
My pleasure. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Let's just dive right into it, I guess. Can you, for those of you who might not know you, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself and kind of what were you doing leading up to you getting involved in crypto?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from the States, currently based in Hong Kong and in Dubai. That's where most of our team is. Have been in crypto for a pretty long time now. Bought my first Bitcoin back in 2013 when I was still in uni. But before I went like full time down the crypto rabbit hole, was working at a bank in Shanghai. But actually, I was doing kind of like blockchain crypto adjacent research. So really, my entire working career has been crypto related. So yeah, have been in crypto really full time since about 2017 when I moved down to Hong Kong. From Shanghai, worked in exchange business, brokerage. I've done some of the early STOs with a regulated broker dealer out of the US. And then founded Mantra in, let's see, DeFi summer 2020, or actually right before. So
Yeah,
Mantra's going on almost 5 years now.
right. You mentioned you heard about Bitcoin in 2013. What was it back then when you heard
Yes.
it? Did you pay attention to it, or what is your Bitcoin story, so to speak? Yeah.
So I had a buddy named Trey Tomlinson. He was my uni friend who was a computer science major and was just kind of like into it, I guess, and told me about it. I think it was like $500 at the time, which, for me at that time was a lot of money. um, and got a little bit of exposure, followed along generally, but I wasn't like full time down the crypto rabbit hole, so to speak, just yet. I think my real aha moment, I think, was really more via like fintech actually. And um, I remember when I was at business school, I was kind of like doing case studies on some of the earlier fintech companies, which I just found interesting. And then when I was at the bank, I started researching all these different fintech businesses. A lot of them were blockchain companies. Um, and I just remember like when I was in Shanghai, like seeing basically the kind of the advent of being able to like basically like own your financial life in your hand. Obviously, it's not like decentralized or anything, but through uh, WeChat and Alipay and Tencent and all these kind of these big Chinese tech giants. Like basically, you did everything from your phone, and I just like aha, I'm like, wow, that's the way it should be. And then just kind of like kept researching, kept getting into it, and now I'm here build mantra.
Yeah. And what's the story of Mantra? How did you decide to co-found it, and how did you get started with it?
Yeah. So Mantra was a DeFi summer, like pretty early DeFi project. We were initially trying to build out on Polkadot, and with an ad ecosystem. And it was, myself and a couple of friends who started it, and we wanted to create like a DeFi DAO, basically. We were relatively early users of, DeFi products, MakerDAO, early Uniswap V1, like these type of things. Um, and we just kind of went for it, to be honest. Didn't really know what we were doing. Ended up building out a number of different products. We had, a relatively successful launchpad. We had staking. We had a lending and borrowing product. So we had a number of different things. And, over the course of time, had obviously a lot of ups and downs, as I think any entrepreneurial journey does, but also in crypto, I think the highs are pretty high and the lows can be pretty low.
Yeah.
Um, and we ended up basically going through this kind of evolution and really seeing, bringing together like a lot of the tech that we had built with some of the licensing focus that we had very early on. And it just seemed to be a pretty perfect mix. So then, during, I guess, the bear market of 2022 and 2023, which was quite hard, we were going about getting licensing in the UAE. We had been building a chain, but as like almost like two separate things. And then, fortunately, we got some financial support at the end of the end of last year, almost to the day, actually. And which is kind of crazy. So December 19th, I think, is like the day Mantra's life changed in my mind.
What happened back then? What happened back then?
Well, we made a handshake agreement with these people who wanted to invest in us, and they were like the first kind of big investor support that we needed to do it. And then obviously that took some time to kind of close and finalize everything, but that was like the catalyst for everything. And that was like, finally we got someone to kind of back us and also to bring together those two pieces, which was the chain and the kind of the licensing and the platform. So we like put those together with that support. And that's been kind of like what's really been, the catalyst for our growth this year. And it has allowed us to, be one of the, I guess, best performing tokens of 2024, basically.
We'll get to that for sure. We'll get to that. You mentioned that you started off considering building on Polkadot. Did you start off as a parachain, or was it because I don't think, were parachains a thing back in 2020?
They were. They were talking about it. They hadn't started yet, but that was kind of like the initial idea that everyone was going to, become one. So we were looking into that, and honestly, we were like quite early, so they didn't have anything really ready for us to actually launch there. And this was maybe a little bit naive, but we had this extremely ambitious roadmap that said we were going to do all these things in a specific period of time. And people in crypto, they like, if you put a date out, you better stick to it. Yeah. Which I understand. But it wasn't feasible if we didn't do something different. So we ended up actually launching most of our stuff to start on Ethereum. And then, that was like the time when Ethereum gas went crazy. BSC or BNB chain became quite popular. Polygon became quite popular. So we started building on some of these, cheaper alternative chains, EVM compatible ones. And I think we always had the idea to make our own chain. And I guess probably towards the end of 2022, maybe probably towards the end of 2022 is when we really started going for it. And built during the course of 2023, pretty much on a shoestring budget. Got our testnet launched in November of 2023, the first one, and then again closed that funding, had our second testnet, and launched mainnet in October of this year. So it's been kind of this iterative journey. A lot of people say like, oh, you pivoted to RWA, which I don't necessarily think I've ever pivoted into RWA, because we did one of the first STOs back in 2019 where we tokenized the professional basketball players contract. So it was always just an evolution for me to kind of get these different pieces of the puzzle together, the technology, the mind share, the licensing, the regulation, like all these things had to come together, and fortunately it came together at a good time for us.
Honestly, I think a lot of people right now are just relatively new to the ecosystem, to the market in general, and they don't really realize that RWAs are not a real thing, like not a new thing, not a real thing. They've been around for quite a while. I remember the craze with, first it was like ICOs, and then it was STOs, and then there was initial DEX offerings and whatnot. So asset tokenization has been in the industry for quite a while. So
100%, definitely not a new thing. But it has a new acronym now, and I think people are picking up on it now. They're talking about it at all levels.
So can you kind of explain what's the purpose of Mantra, as in what's the purpose of your layer one blockchain, and what's the main focus point?
Sure. Yeah. So we we're built on top of the Cosmos SDK. We are a purpose-built blockchain specifically geared for asset tokenization. So we've built a number of different modules focusing on identity, token issuance, like token control, compliance, and all these things kind of come together to allow assets to be easily tokenized, whether it's real estate or financial instruments or IP or what so have you, and then be programmable and composable in an on-chain kind of DeFi ecosystem. So that's really, our goal. It's meant to be a permissionless blockchain. So it's, permissionless, anyone can read and write on one side of the chain, but there's a permission layer where a lot of the real-world assets are issued from. So there's a clear, record of provenance of that on and off-chain kind of interaction.
Okay. And on your main website, there is one section which is for builders. And right there, it says that Mantra provides regulatory compliant infrastructure. Can you kind of expand on that? What does it mean that the infrastructure you're providing is compliant with regulations?
Yeah, so I think it's quite important to understand kind of like how regulation works in this space. And it's basically a separation between, we believe it's a separation between, the application layer and the protocol layer. So we actually feel that in most instances, you're not actually like regulating the protocol, you're regulating the interaction with the end user. And that's obviously done through applications, right? So that usually ends up in our world being when you buy something, when you trade something, when you invest in something, when you on and off ramp something, etc. The chain itself is really just a piece of software that people can build on, hence the protocol. Obviously, whenever we do a token issuance, that needs to be done in a regulatory compliant manner. So like, our Mantra is a Swiss association based out of Zug. And we have our proper approvals with FINMA and all the regulatory bodies there, but the chain itself isn't a regulated chain, if that makes sense. That being said, as I mentioned, we've kind of built all of these different modules around, identity, around, so, KYC, AML type of thing, around compliance, so permissioning systems, creating governance frameworks for who can interact with what asset, where, when, and how, these type of things. So we basically made it very easy for builders, whether you're Web 2 native or Web 3, to be able to, create RWA assets on chain and then actually do stuff with them. And that's effectively what it means. So we've kind of created like a suite of tools that allow builders to, build on our chain and build different types of applications, whether it's, DEXs or tokenization platforms or lending and borrowing protocols, what so have you.
Can you perhaps give us a simple example of an application an RWA application that can be built on Mantra? So for our listeners and viewers to kind of get the gist of it, directly.
Sure. Yeah. So one example would be, a fractional real estate project. And I can name the one that I'm speaking of. It's called Estate Protocol, for example. So these guys are building on Mantra. They have fractional pieces of real estate that you can, buy and own a small portion of legit real estate assets in the UAE, in Dubai. So they're strong team doing some interesting stuff. That's a real world asset product in action, basically, and that's live today, actually.
Do you think it's important to continue this process of asset tokenization? What are the problems that it solves within, let's say, traditional finance? And
I think, obviously, I do think it is important.
It was a stupid question. Yeah, my first part of the question was,
Definitely think it's important. But I do think it is fundamentally dependent on which asset you're talking about, and what you're trying to do with it. So it is very specific in terms of like the asset class, what you're trying to do with it, and even to a little bit like where in the world are you trying to do it from. So I'll use an example maybe to just explain a little bit what I mean. So, we're tokenizing a number of different financial products. Many of these things can be, money market funds, like backed by US Treasuries type of thing, or private credit, or private equity funds, or something like this, right? Currently, those are not necessarily like crypto native products. Many people are doing tokenized versions of these things, and it's not necessarily only to make them more liquid. In many instances, these things are already liquid on traditional, exchanges, but it is potentially an issue of access, or even just the size or the investment amount required to actually even purchase, or get exposure to these type of things. So breaking down and lowering the barrier to entry is one of the important elements of tokenization. But also giving people access who've never had it before. I've never had the ability to go purchase a Blackstone private credit fund, but we're literally like working on tokenizing something that has LP interest in a Blackstone private credit fund. So that's a new piece of access for me that's potentially valuable in my life if I think that that's a good investment decision. So that would be one example. Maybe another example would be the composability of these assets. Real estate's a good example here. So, if you have a large real estate portfolio, it's not always that easy, particularly if it's, maybe spread around the world, to, collateralize and borrow against your holdings if you need some liquidity for whatever reason. But you don't want to sell your, relatively illiquid real estate asset. In the instance of having like tokenized versions of that, you could collateralize and borrow against the value of your real estate portfolio, borrow stable coins, and then go actually out and use that capital for something else. So I think that programmability element is another thing that hasn't happened yet. It can be a massive unlock for a lot of people.
Is someone working on that?
Especially,
I mean the part where you can tokenize, let's say, real estate, convert it in some sort of a token, and then borrow against it. Is there an existing solution?
I wouldn't say there's an existing solution because I have not seen one yet, but we're working on it for sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. I haven't thought about it this way, that you can actually. I've obviously thought about tokenizing real estate and allowing smaller investors to get exposure to something they usually wouldn't have access to. But I never thought about it in a way where you can tokenize a large real asset portfolio and then borrow against it. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that kind of composability element is something, I think currently we're still really focused on primary market, which is fine. You need to start somewhere. Then, the next kind of wave will be the secondary market picking up. And I think between the second and third will be kind of like this composability of these on-chain assets. That's really a massive, massive unlock. So we like to think of like any asset, anytime, anywhere in the world in the palm of your hand. Like that's kind of the holy grail of tokenization in my mind.
And also the entire
back to that example that I was talking about in China of being able to manage your relatively your financial life from the palm of your hand.
Yeah, and the whole field of asset tokenization received a huge endorsement earlier this year when Larry Fink, arguably one of the most influential people in finance, in the whole finance space, said that it's going to revolutionize finance in general. How did you react to that when you first saw him making that statement, or did it make such an impression to you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we had been believers in that statement for a long time, right? So it was good affirmation that now again that like piece I mentioned before. It's not always just about the tech or the regulation. It's also about the mind share, and that really helped us get industry mind share that this was a real thing and that the big boys are doing it. So. I think that was a huge thing for us. And, I kind of like jokingly call him Uncle Larry, because he is kind of like I guess almost like the godfather of tokenization for us, which is kind of cool. But it is good to see that, these massive financial institutions are taking this seriously. And, you can see that with the activities that we're doing and, the people that we're engaging in conversations with. It's the real deal, who's who of finance.
Yeah. Now back to your performance from this year. You mentioned it earlier, but like, what the hell, man? Your token is up like 17,000% in a year. I think it's like one of the best, if not the best, top 100 performing cryptocurrencies. What's behind this?
Yeah, thank you, man. And well, obviously everything I say, not financial advice,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
be clear. Um, no, I think it was back to right place, right time, right team, right focus, and kind of having everything come together at once. And actually also like very much our focus on the particular like part of the world, which is kind of like Middle East and Asia. Um, and we honestly like suffered for, a few years when, initially launched, it was great, it was fine, things were moving. And then, bear market hit and we were like, really were most coins don't come back from where we came from.
Yeah.
We're not like the shiny new thing. And, I think because of that, because of, having that kind of, I guess almost like a repricing from being a DApp token to an L1 token was quite critical. Very important to have that relative value trade. And, then we just executed flawlessly. The team worked really hard. We were everywhere. I mean, I was at God knows how many conferences this year, speaking everywhere, getting in front of people, doing things that aren't necessarily super scalable. But it worked. And, now I think we're like, I don't want to say everyone knows Mantra. That's definitely not the case, but we're a bit more of a household name now, which is good. I mean, I still think there's still a really, really long way to go. Like we're, frankly, just getting started, which is kind of crazy to say after 17,000% up in a year. But I really do believe that. I mean, we just launched our mainnet a couple months back. We're really just at the cusp of bringing on all these deals that we've been working on in the background, which we've only announced a couple of them. Most of them, people don't even know about yet. And I'm talking about like billions and billions of dollars of pipeline. And we're still, at the cusp of building out a significantly, robust and encompassing, RWA ecosystem. So, still a long way to go. Basically, a lot of work ahead, to be honest. But we're excited, and team's pumped, and honestly, even like sometimes the success is also your own challenge. So it's it's easy to get complacent, and we definitely don't want to do that. I guess it's my job as a founder to be ever like focused on the next thing. But interestingly enough, like I'm not upset or angry or anything like that, but I'm not like even remotely satisfied with how the year's gone, which is kind of crazy. There's just so much left to do and so much work and so much improvement we need to do. So.
And if I take you back to the bear market and through the tough times, how does a founder cope with this?
I prefer it, to be honest. I honestly prefer it because, there's so much more competition in bull markets. Not necessarily just by like mind share, but there's just so much more noise. There's so much more noise, so many people, there's so many shiny objects, so many things happening around. Easy to get distracted, easy to get less focused. And I prefer it when you can just kind of grind and work hard. And frankly, like this coming year, like I'm gonna take my conference schedule way, 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 way back. I'm gonna be. I don't want to be at all these things anymore, which is kind of the opposite of what a lot of people do in bull markets. But that's okay. I mean, we got a big team now. We're grinding, and we're ready for whatever comes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've talked to quite a bit of founders as yourself, and a lot of them seem to. Well, I don't know if prefer is the right word, but at least find the positives in bear markets where things are silent. There is definitely a lot less noise, as you mentioned, and people can focus on building and doing the fundamental stuff rather than, focusing on the, let's say, public facing type of things, which is also important, of course, but still like it feels like a lot of projects are straying aside from their core fundamentals and focusing on appearance, which is, at some point, I guess, counterproductive.
Oh, 100% agree with that. 100% agree. It makes sense.
Speaking of the market, Bitcoin's above 100K. Did you guys have a 100K Bitcoin party, or at least did you celebrate it in some way? Or
you know what? I don't think we did. Obviously it's good for the industry. It's an exciting time for the space. Having seen it from $500 to 100,000 is pretty crazy. But honestly, we're pretty focused on what we're doing right now, and I think it's you talk about noise, right? Like we want to be focused on our stuff. So Bitcoin, great. We'd like to see the industry doing well, but we want to be as focused as possible. And to be honest, that's hard when you have a 24/7 asset that goes up and down all the time. And if you look at Ohm and today it's at 4, whatever. Next week's it's at 350. But 3 months ago was at 70 cents, or a year ago was at 2.5 cents. So that's a pretty I always say to the team, like, when in doubt, zoom out, and don't, like, markets are irrational in some of these instances. So you can be doing the best thing ever and the market doesn't do anything about it, and then you can be doing nothing and you pump 10% a day or 20%. So it's like just focus on what you're doing, and in the end that wins out.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like time in the market type of thing, but to me personally, this particular cycle feels a little bit different. And even though we are above 100K, which is like the big psychological target that everyone was excited about, I don't think I quite felt that, to be honest, as well, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agreed. It's kind of always like I felt like it was kind of an inevitability. But and then I think it's definitely different, right? You didn't really have this like crazy like altcoin retail speculatory kind of
season.
Like yeah, it was just different. And that's fine. I think that's probably a sign of maturity.
Do you think we'll see such a season? Again, of course, prefacing this with that nothing we discuss here is financial advice, of course.
No, yeah, definitely on that one. I think maybe for certain types of assets, but not all. To be honest, I think you kind of saw that a little bit with meme coins. It's interesting that the best performing crypto assets outside of Bitcoin were basically meme coins and RWA assets. So those are like two exact opposite ends of the spectrum. One is more like compliant financialization infrastructure, and the other one is
utility,
pure speculation. Yeah. Which is interesting to see, but I think so. Outside of that, I'm honestly not sure, because the one good thing I think is, as you see the industry mature a bit, is there is more focus on substance. Like, we're always focused on trying to build substance for the business, build substance for the protocol, and make sure that people see that very publicly, because that's really what impacts your project significantly.
I'm going to check that when you mentioned meme coins, but I think, if I'm not wrong, meme coins account for around $120 billion worth of total capitalization. Let me just confirm this really quickly.
Wow.
And so
that's crazy.
The total meme coin market cap right now, according to CoinGecko, is around $126 billion. For context,
126.
Yeah, for context, like 6 years ago or 5 years ago, I think the entire industry was worth around 300 billion. That was in 2019 or the end of 2018 or something like that.
It's crazy.
Have you given it some thought? Like, do you think this is something that will continue with meme coins specifically? Or why do you think they are popping? I guess people are just interested in, gambling, but
yeah, honestly, I think it's just like, there's speculation has a use case, and it has product market fit, right? People like to gamble, and if you make it very easy and kind of fun, potentially fun, people are going to do it, and that's fine. It has a place, but I don't think it's necessarily like, obviously it's not our focus. But it's okay. I think it's interesting, and it's a good way to kind of, like, it's part of the culture. There's a lot of element of culture in crypto. So that's kind of how it seeps in, I guess.
Is it technically possible to build a meme coin on Mantra?
For sure. There's definitely meme coins coming on Mantra.
Okay,
I know
okay.
that for a fact. I know that for a fact.
Okay, that's fun to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell me what's next? What's the, what are you guys working on that we can expect from you next? And as a follow-up question, what is it that you are personally most excited about in 2025?
Yeah, so I guess probably the biggest focus for us is ecosystem development, right? So we're focused on, like, we have basically three core things. Mainnet integrations with like tier one exchanges, because we're on a lot of exchanges, but we need the mainnet token or chain integrated and the mainnet coin. TVL, bringing all these real world asset deals that that multi-billion-dollar pipeline talked about, getting them actually represented on chain, ready to go. And then, that's that primary market, then secondary, then composability type of thing that I mentioned. And then third is ecosystem dApps. We need these projects deployed. We need these projects issuing tokens. We need these projects bringing on users and transaction volume and, activity and airdrops and all these different types of things. So those are the three main things that we're focusing on. I don't want to say exclusively, but like if it's not one of those three things and it doesn't directly relate to one of those three things, then like we're not doing it.
Right. Okay. And what do you have any concrete, developments planned for 2025? Something out of the roadmap, perhaps?
Concrete developments. I'm not sure how to answer this. We have a lot of we have a lot of stuff coming, right? Like, we have all these different dApps that I talked about that are going to be launching soon. We have a number of different airdrops that will be happening as part of that. And, it's a little bit like we at the same time as we were building the chain, we're also building the on-chain exchange, and that's, expecting to receive our final licensing approval soon. So that'll be an interesting one to actually start building towards that secondary market, liquidity that doesn't really exist yet in RWAs. So I think that's probably one of the bigger focuses outside of those three things. Although obviously that directly does connect because it is a dApp on the chain. It does bring TVL. So that you can kind of think about it through that lens, and then you can see, okay, where do I actually want to be spending time? Where do I want to be focusing? And another way you could kind of think about that is like, if we're talking like our goal is to hit 10 billion of TVL by the end of next year, which is a lot. I mean, that's like as much as Solana, if I'm not mistaken. I think that would basically become the second largest in TVL outside of Ethereum for a chain, if that happened. Obviously, these guys will go up too, but that's kind of our goal. And in order to kind of achieve that, we need to be focusing on deals that will actually help us get there. And it's almost like you need to focus on the things that are like the $1 billion opportunity, not like, or the $1 billion tokenization deal, not the 20 million type of thing. Doesn't mean that that we won't support a 20 million,
of course,
opportunity, but it just kind of the lens on how I have to spend my time. Okay.
Well, JP, I think that's a wrap. Thank you for the recording. Can you tell us where we can find you, where we can find Mantra on socials, your websites?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Twitter, JP_Mullin, MULLIN 888, or Mantra, MANTRA_chain. And then mantrachain.io. I think we're working on getting a new domain now in the not too distant future.
Good to know. Well, once again, thank you for doing this.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Great to talk. And, I'm sure we'll have to do an update sometime next year.